Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
This is not your father's Republican Party. I had great disagreements with John Danforth. This is not Danforth's Republican Party. I wrote a year ago, after the horrific events in Charlottesville, and Barack and I decided when we got elected, when we got out of office, we'd agreed. We both said to one another, let's give this guy a chance to get his administration up and running. Because George W. Bush did it for us. We disagreed with him greatly. But he gave us a chance to set up, get started without starting the criticism right away. Well, guess what happened? Charlottesville came along, and I couldn't remain silent anymore. I come out of the civil rights movement. Folks, I wrote for the Atlantic magazine an article entitled, "We're in the battle for America's soul." And I think we are in a battle for America's soul. Hate is on the march.
It is.
And we watch white supremacists and neo-Nazis crawl out from under the rocks, come out of those fields carrying torches. I never thought I'd see that. No, I'm not trying, this is not a political point. I mean this, man. I never thought I'd see that. And singing and chanting the same anti-Semitic bile that was chanted in the streets of Nuremberg, Munich, Berlin. It's the same exact language they used. Accompanied by David Dukes of the Ku Klux Klan. And folks, what happened? Those who came along and said, not in my city. That's not who we are. And there was trouble. And then we had a president of the United States listing them as a moral equivalence of both of them. They had both good people. Equivalence between those dark forces and those opposing them. Folks, no president's ever done that. No president. And hate will continue to grow if we do not speak up and speak out. And folks,
It's true. It's true. I may disagree with Joe Biden on a number of things. God knows I do. And the first thing that pops into my mind is what's her? The Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill. He didn't understand. What kind of harassment women faced at work. He really didn't get that women were not only talked down to and marginalized and fluffy little things to be played with, and that we couldn't possibly run a business or think for ourselves or be anything but baby bearing, estrogen bearing beings, right? That was our only purpose in life, and we couldn't. I mean, this was a very 1950s view that he had, and he screwed that up but good. And Clarence Thomas, 27 years later, is still on the Supreme Court, but that's how long ago that was. 27 years ago. So I do disagree with Joe, but you know what I pulled? I don't know how many people remember those talk shows that we used to be subjected to, the Morton Downey Jr.'s, the first Republican haters on the TV, and the Joe Pines. Does anybody remember Joe Pine? He was like a real racist, misogynist, Republican talk show host that denigrated. I mean, this was during, the protests, Vietnam War, Summer of Love, all this stuff, and they didn't understand the young people. The young people were not to be understood. And Helen Gurley Brown was trying to make it clear that women could run businesses and magazines, and that we had ideas that involved things other than marriage and baby making. And you had guys on TV like this one.
Helen the Dingbat.
Helen the Dingbat.
Just to show you I'm not nitpicking with this lady, listen to some advice she gives in this book, Outrageous Opinions. She's talking now to a lonesome female.
A lonesome female.
I don't know whether I can, well, I'll try. She says one way to spend a Saturday night alone is to put on some records, jazz, classical, or cha-cha-cha, pull down the shades, and dance naked for a couple of hours.
What is so outrageous about that?
Helen, they're going to send you to the funny farm.
Nobody's going to know this girl is in there dancing naked. And listen, it's very slenderizing. It's much better than doing push-ups and the other kinds of things you have to do to keep skinny.
How often do you do that?
Well, I don't remember the last time, but when I was a single girl and didn't have anything to do on Saturday night, I considered it a very appropriate occupation. Nobody knows what you're doing. It's terribly good for your figure. It's doing a kind of interpretive dancing. As a matter of fact, I think many girls who live alone run around without any clothes on if there's no one there.
Well, I can
it's
see,
good
you know,
for
they
you.
get
It's
caught
terrific.
short when the phone rings or something, but to pull down the shades on a Saturday night and dance naked for a couple of hours, this is not my idea of future wife material.
Oh, Joe.
Oh, Joe, we'll be...
Yeah, I mean, you know, and I heard this today because, again, I have a rental car right now. Apparently, my car will be repaired and ready for pickup tomorrow. It was the alternator, and for the low bargain basement price of $1,441 plus tax, I can pick up my car tomorrow. Who can afford to live? I mean, it's just so unbelievable. But the way that they, you know, this is the 1950s mindset, and the racism and the division in this country, and the tearing apart and the dehumanization of, certain people at certain times. Because this president's very transactional. Again, ISIS, they behead people. Yeah, well, so do your friends, the royal family of Saudi Arabia, behead people, and you don't have a problem with them because, quite frankly, you get paid. He's got a hotel with his name slapped on it in Dubai. So, you know, the guy will dehumanize this one or that one or this one or that one. And women, of course, women are just, we're flotsam. We're supposed to be denigrated and we're supposed to be talked down to. And he's a messiah and you could grab us. There was a case yesterday where a guy was caught grabbing a woman literally by that body part on an airplane. And he said, the president says it's okay to grab women by the P word. That was his defense. So, I mean, this is such a throwback to the Jesse Helms era. In fact, if you read the homework today, there's a bunch of articles about Jesse Helms and racism and how it started. And the ads, okay, is what started me down this road, because Trump released his version of what they call the Willie Horton ad. Now, the Willie Horton ad was in 1988. It was, conceived by dirty guys like Roger Ailes, who went on to create and run and propagandize an entire news station called Fox News. And also Lee Atwater, who died of a brain tumor. His own dirty brain, attacked him and killed him. And he apologized before his death for all of the pain he caused and for the Willie Horton ad. But in 1988, there was crime that was a problem in the United States. And people were very sensitive to crime. Crime was the Republican issue. They became the law and order guys and da-da-da-da-da. And they ran, really a heinous ad about a criminal. A criminal. They changed his name. Willie Horton is not really named Willie, okay? He's not. It's just part of this image that they created. And by pointing to one criminal, they were able to smear an entire population of human beings. They were able to turn all people. And they picked Willie Horton and changed his name because Willie Horton was the biggest, blackest, biggest Afro-wearing guy they could find. And they put him in a commercial. And everybody now has apologized, that was involved, except for Roger Ailes. I don't believe he ever apologized. But on his deathbed, Lee Atwater did apologize for making the Willie Horton ad. But there's really nothing, even in 88, there was nothing new about the Willie Horton ad. I can't find here it is. I got a cut sheet. Which one's Willie Horton? I don't know. Which one's Willie Horton? Thank you. Here.
Bush and Dukakis on crime. Bush supports the death penalty for first-degree murderers. Dukakis not only opposes the death penalty, he allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend passes from prison. One was Willie Horton, who murdered a boy in a robbery, stabbing him 19 times. Despite a life sentence, Horton received 10 weekend passes from prison. Horton fled, kidnapped a young couple, stabbing the man and repeatedly raping his girlfriend. Weekend prison passes. Dukakis on crime.
Right. So I have to tell you that Dukakis did not start the weekend furlough pass program. That was started by his predecessors, who were Republican. Okay, they believed in the weekend furlough part. They started it, and they thought it would be, a good thing to do to help people re-emerge into society. It was not Dukakis's plan. Okay, but that was 88. Jesse Helms of North Carolina. Jesse Helms was probably the most disgusting politician that ever came down the road. I think that, while he was neglecting all of North Carolina, okay, he just didn't do anything for North Carolina. You had people living, I swear to God, in North Carolina under Jesse Helms when he was a senator. You had people living in North Carolina in Jesse Helms apartments, just like Sean Hannity bought all those low-rent apartments in Georgia. Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's attorney, helped him, get this deal where he could rent to low-rent individuals and be a slumlord, basically, and never fix anything. That's what Jesse Helms was doing in North Carolina. He had these apartments. The Jesse Helms personal property included not just Jesse Helms' mansion, but a dozen rental units that they owned. When he was finally investigated, they found that Jesse Helms employed 2 rental agents to manage their properties. One was in low-income black neighborhoods, and another one was in middle-class white neighborhoods. Most of them were in disrepair. They had rusty fuse boxes and peeling linoleum, missing doors, leaking ceilings. None of them had appliances. You just didn't supply appliances. They didn't have a heater. They didn't have heat. And people would pay in the black neighborhood $250 a month for no heater, no appliances. And in the white neighborhood, $325 a month for no heater, no appliances with peeling linoleum, etc. This is how Jesse, and this is a Sean Hannity model too. Jesse Helms ran this ad. This is one that I call it, well, it is called the Hands ad. Okay? This is a pure racist commercial.
You needed that job, and you were the best qualified. But they had to give it to a minority because of a racial quota. Is that really fair? Harvey Gantt says it is. Gantt supports Ted Kennedy's racial quota law that makes the color of your skin more important than your qualifications. You'll vote on this issue next Tuesday. For racial quotas, Harvey Gantt. Against racial quotas, Jesse Helms.
Now, I got to tell you that that ad always blew me away. It just always pissed me off. There's, racial quotas are illegal, as you know. They're illegal. You can't do that. You can't. And of course, it's not so much the color of your skin. It's your life experience that might add some points. Right? Meanwhile, the least qualified person in the world had to have been Jesse Helms. I don't know if you know his background. I mean, he was a virulent racist. There's no doubt about it. And he's just like Donald Trump. He died in 2008, but he was just like Donald Trump. I mean, he cheated in elections. He was forced to pay over and over again fines for cheating. In 1986, the Federal Election Commission penalized this club, this Carolina Congressional Club, $10,000, ordered it to reorganize because it had illegally subsidized Jesse Helms' 1984 campaign. And then the FEC penalized Helms for $25,000 for accepting a $700,000 illegal contribution in 1992. The Congressional Club had to settle with the Justice Department over pre-election mailing of postcards that falsely threatened 125,000 black voters with jail if they voted, if they went to the polls, right? It's so unbelievable. But who was Jesse Helms? 1950, Jesse Helms was a radio guy in the Navy in World War II. He was a broadcaster in the Navy. Actually, he was a Navy recruiter during World War II. And he recruited using, the radio. So he learned about the radio, and he decided it was a great medium. It was, this is why when people tell you social media is the problem, I'd laugh. I laugh my ass off because the problem started a long time ago. First, it was yellow journalism. Then it was pamphleteering before that. Then when radio became popular and everybody had one in their living room, the radio became everything. Then television came along and TV became everything. And in the 1950s, they put all these shows on with these right-wing lunatics telling, about Jesus, number one, and number two, that women were, unworthy of any kind of respect, that they were just, dingbats and what. Okay. But Jesse Helms in 1950 learned about the radio, and he decided to become an unofficial researcher for a conservative candidate in 1950, a guy named Willis Smith, who was running for the Senate. This in 1950 was considered, because remember, during the war, it was all about supporting the war effort. It was before the war, it was anti-Semitism a la Charles Lindbergh and others. After the war, things were kind of copacetic for a really long time. We had FDR, investments were being made, electricity was being brought to the Tennessee Valley. We were building dams. You had Eisenhower. You had Eisenhower do the highway system. All these things were good, and we were people were in the middle class. People weren't renting; they were buying houses. People felt secure that, their parents would be taken care of. Things were going well for us. Well, in 1950, Jesse Helms decided that he was going to help this guy, Willis Smith. That campaign was considered one of the meanest and most racially divisive in the country's history. This ad, I don't have the ad because it's so old, but it had a doctored photo of the incumbent's wife dancing with a black man. Yeah. And the newspaper advertising manager later told a Jesse Helms biographer that it was Jesse Helms that personally cut up the photos and put them together and put them in the newspaper. Anyway, this guy Smith won. And so he hired Jesse Helms as an administrative assistant in the Senate, in his Senate office. So in 1953, 3 years later, Jesse Helms returned to North Carolina. And for some stupid reason, you talk about guys that were not qualified. This is the whole point. It's always projection, right? Jesse Helms became the director of the North Carolina Banking Association. He knew nothing about banking. He was a radio guy, just like Mike Pence. Mike Pence, who is the vice president of the United States, was just a talk radio guy from Bum F, Indiana. And he parlayed his right-wing lunacy on the radio into a House seat. Now he's the vice president of the United States. Jesse Helms did the same damn thing by playing on intense racism that already existed and amplifying it with doctored photos. Got a job in Washington, and then somehow became the North Carolina director of the Banking Association. He spent the next 7 years at the Banking Association for North Carolina handing out money to his bosses. Stealing. That got him a seat on the Raleigh City Council, and then he went back to being a TV commentator in 1960. And he was on TV. And what did he do on TV? He railed against the civil rights movement. He called Martin Luther King a Negro hoodlum, a sex pervert. I mean, said he was on welfare and just lied and lied and lied. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Jesse Helms was supporting every right-wing lunatic dictator that you could possibly imagine in the southern hemisphere, in the northern hemisphere. I mean, everybody, the South American, the Central American dictators, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Haiti, Pinochet in Chile, they were all his best friends. He was laundering their money and giving it to his bosses. This is where this comes from, okay? There's nothing, like I said, there's nothing new under the sun, and it's not because of the internet. It just makes it easier to spy on people and get psychological profiles on people. But this is as old as the crack in Jesse Helms' decrepit dead ass, okay? You have people that remember, the hearings that were broadcast wall to wall in black and white on the TV in the 50s, where Donald Trump's attorney, Roy Cohen, was the counsel for the senator from Wisconsin, Joe McCarthy, who was a drunkard. I mean, he was a drunk. But he understood that this hatred, that this racism worked. It played in Peoria. That, it's kind of where the phrase comes from. It played all over, and so he started with the anti-Semitism again. That died out after World War II. Before World War II, there was the America First movement. And that was Charles Lindbergh and every isolationist that didn't want to come to the aid of Germany and the Christians in Germany who were helping hide the Jews or the gays that were being slaughtered there, right? They said there was no reason. Those people, were animals anyway. Let them lose their souls, whatever, and didn't want to get involved in World War II. They were the America First people. This is what Donald Trump calls his campaign. That's where it comes from. This is not new. And then it made a comeback after the war, but not right after the war. Just, 5-6 years after the war, when the war started becoming, a distant memory. And these Republicans started to do the anti-Semitism again with the McCarthy hearings. Remember, Jews were supposed to be communists. Jews were lefties. Jews were really left, just like they do to Bernie Sanders now, right? This is anti-Semitism, this whole thing, where, we all understand Social Security is socialism. We all understand Medicare is the government. We all understand, that the military itself is socialist, meaning everybody gets protection regardless of their ability to pay. The police is socialism. Public school is socialism. We get that, right? But somehow it has to be equated with Jews. And that's what they did during the McCarthy hearings. The sick part about it is that when these Republicans were smearing Jews and were hunting Jews with the big red scare that they were all communists and that they deserved to die, and they did manage to kill, a couple of Jewish people. They did, the Rosenbergs. They managed to get the death penalty for them. The same Republicans were supporting every dictator, every communist, real communist that you could imagine all throughout Central America. You want to know why Central America looks like Central America? Because we kept doing this. We kept on befriending every dictator in Central America. And then Reagan did it too with the Contras were killing doctors and nurses and children. And the response was, they're communists. They deserve to die. And the GOP just, never met an authoritarian communist dictator that they didn't love. And Donald Trump's the same way. It's who they are. They cheat. They befriend dictators. And you want to know why our neighbors are in such peril, why 3,500 people, and he's going to send the military to look strong, to look like a tough guy, to what? To do what? To clear brush while these Honduran housewives and their kids surrender themselves, because that's what they do. They will look for the Border Patrol. They will look for the green uniform, and they will surrender, and they will attempt to make a claim for asylum. That is what they will do. They're not going to fight. They're not going to argue. They're certainly unarmed. And the president knows this. And now he's trying to tell you that he's a dictator, that he can change the Constitution with a simple stroke of his, pen that looks like a defibrillation in an EKG. Yeah, he's actually telling you he can undo the constitutional amendment that was ratified and voted on.
Birthright citizenship is a very, very important subject. In my opinion, it's much less complex than people think. I think it says it very loud and clear in the Constitution that you don't have to go through the process of whatever they're talking about. And by the way, this is not a constitutional amendment. You don't need a constitutional amendment for birthright citizenship. I believe that you can have a simple vote in Congress, or it's even possible, in my opinion, this is after meeting with some very talented legal scholars, that you can do it through an executive order. Now, I'd rather do it through Congress because that's permanent, but we can certainly do it through, I really believe we can do it through executive order. One other thing, if President Obama can get DACA approved, if you look at DACA, where he actually said, well, this isn't legal or this I can't do, but I'll do it anyway. Oh. And then he gets a judge to approve it. And it'll ultimately be decided by the Supreme Court, I hope quickly. But certainly if he can do DACA, we can do this by executive order. With that being said, I think Congress will ultimately act, but I may very well do it by executive order. Just so you understand, a person comes in, was never in our country before,
right,
has a baby.
Yes.
And now all of a sudden the baby's a United States citizen.
Yes.
And through chain migration and other things, many other people come in through the baby. It's ridiculous. Baby. All you have to do is take a look at what Harry Reid said in 1993. And guess what? Before he went insane, he got it right.
Holy crap. Holy crap. First of all, I want you to know Harry Reid, who was the Senate Majority Leader for 5 seconds. Harry Reid has said that he was wrong, he tried to introduce a piece of legislation that would change birthright citizenship, but he understood that it was unconstitutional and did not proceed. That's number one. Number two, you cannot change the Constitution with an executive order, nor can you change the Constitution with a piece of legislation. I've listened to the right-wing lunatics because, as I said, I only had an AM radio in my car for the last few days, and they are making these crazy, crazy, ridiculous cases that, oh, yes, he can. No, he can't. DACA was not a change in the Constitution. What DACA simply did was allow work permits for people not yet citizens who wanted to go to college and or work. That's all it did. That's all DACA did. It didn't change anything in the Constitution, okay? It didn't change one damn thing. Not one damn thing. But the 14th Amendment is explicit that if you are born here, you are a U.S. citizen unless you were born to a diplomat who is still the subject of another government's authority. Because, diplomats, they have diplomatic compounds, like the Russian diplomatic compounds. They're not subject to our laws. If you murder somebody in the United States and you are a diplomat, you're not tried in the United States. You may not ever get you could be we could send you out of the country, right? We can tell you go back where you came from. But it's up to the country that you are a sovereign of to prosecute you or not. Because you're not under the jurisdiction of U.S. laws. Those are little islands, okay? Diplomatic facilities and consulates, those are diplomatic islands. Same thing in the consulate in Turkey, the Saudi consulate. That's Saudi soil. You step into the Saudi consulate in Turkey, step into the Saudi consulate in the United States, you're on Saudi soil. That's just the way it works. Now, what was really hysterical was watching Judge Napolitano, this right-wing lunatic judge, explain this to the news model at Fox this morning.
Congress can't change the Constitution. So if the president wants legislation that says, for example, the Congress declares that birthright citizenship no longer exists, right, that legislation would be just as unconstitutional as a presidential executive order declaring that birthright citizenship doesn't exist. Why do I say that? Because of the plain meaning of the 14th Amendment, which says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state in which they live.
But it's that word jurisdiction that
So are illegals subject to the jurisdiction of the United States? Of course they are. They commit a crime, they get prosecuted. They hit an automobile accident, they can sue. They have basic human rights. They can't vote, they can't run for office, but they are subject to the jurisdiction thereof. The phrase subject to the jurisdiction thereof is intended to exclude from automatic citizenship the offspring of those who are not subject to our jurisdiction. Who would that be? Foreign diplomats, foreign heads of state, foreign agents.
But do you agree that our founding fathers couldn't possibly have foreseen 20 million people here illegally?
Of course.
And people abusing the system like Russians and Chinese as well as Central and South Americans.
So the remedy is to change the Constitution, which is very difficult, very cumbersome, and in my opinion will not happen. The remedy would require a vote of 2/3 of both houses of Congress. That's not going to happen now. And ratification by 3/4 of the state legislatures.
Right.
Very cumbersome.
How about legislation driven from Lindsey Graham that passes the House and Senate that makes the courts decide on this and have an honest debate about this?
Well, the courts can't just decide something. They
well,
have
once
to have,
it's challenged. Once
correct.
It's
they have to have a real case or controversy in front of them. But when the Supreme Court has looked at this, candidly, it's gone both ways. But the more recent cases have said whoever is born here is an American citizen.
It's gone both ways, right, because we had the Dred Scott decision by Justice Taney. One of the evilest guys ever to sit on the Supreme Court. He's, he's the Kavanaugh of yesteryear, who said that, Dred Scott was only 3/5 of a human. Yeah, that's dehumanization, you understand? And so we did the 14th Amendment to give citizenship to people that we imported on slave ships. But the Founding Fathers couldn't conceive of, millions of people being here. Are you kidding me? They engineered it. This is so stupid. So stupid, this conversation. That's why I haven't spent a whole lot of time on it. Because it can't happen. Period. End of story. He cannot end birthright citizenship with a stroke of his ridiculous pen, his Sharpie marker. Can't do it. Can't do it, Sally. Can't have it. I can't do it. I can't have it.
It's the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
All right, people. You want to see the new ad? This is the new ad I'm going to play you. This comes right out of the Jesse Helms playbook, and now you have some background on Jesse Helms, what you needed to know about him. Lee Atwater, Roger Ailes, etc. This was produced by an ad agency where Jason Miller works, or worked. Now he's in the White House, and he's writing all these incendiary racist speeches for Donald Trump. This is a perpetrator. His name is Luis Bracamontes. He's from Mexico. He killed 2 police officers, and he's obviously insane. He got the death penalty. This happened in California. He killed 2 sheriffs.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, please step out of the hallway. If it's dead, break up soon, and I'll kill more. See, the only thing if I can regret is if I can just kill 2. I wish if I can kill more of those motherfuckers. I'll kill more cops soon.
Oh my God, Honduras.
He says he wants to apply for pardon for the felony he committed. Attempt of murder.
President Donald J. Trump is running that ad. President Donald J. Trump. And, you know, he says things like anybody who can't name the enemy is not fit to lead this country, you know, blah, blah, blah. Before, all this hostility was directed at radical Islamic terrorism. Now that we actually have a beheading of a green card holder who wrote for the Washington Post, it ain't so bad. You don't hear very much about that. But you do see this commercial smearing Hondurans who are from a different country, number one. Honduras is not Mexico. Salvador is not Mexico. Guatemala is not Mexico. Costa Rica is not Mexico. It's not Honduras. It's not Panama, where he has a hotel, is in Central America. It's also not Mexico, but, you know, whatever. But anyway, I just want to show you that we've got other people who have killed police officers. We have Eric Matthew Frine. He ambushed 2 police officers in the township of Blooming Grove in Pennsylvania. He killed one and wounded another, and then he led law enforcement authorities on a 48-day manhunt in the woods. 2 months before that, in Pennsylvania, police discovered Eric Charles Smith, who ran a white supremacist church out of his home in the borough of Baldwin, and built a stockpile of 20 homemade bombs. Then you had Eli Franklin Myers. This is just Pennsylvania I looked at. He's an anti-government survivalist. He shot 2 police officers. He killed one before he was shot dead by state troopers in the small town of Webster, Pennsylvania. And then you also have in Pennsylvania a white supremacist named Richard Poplowski, who opened fire on Pittsburgh police officers who had responded to a domestic dispute at Mom's house. He killed 3. He left 2 injured, and he surrendered. He was very active on far-right websites. He feared the police represented a plot by Barack Obama to take away America's guns. Beyond Pennsylvania, from January 2008 until the end of 2016 during the Trump campaign, there were 63 cases of Islamic domestic terrorism, but 3/4 of them, 76% of them, were foiled plots. They didn't happen. No attack took place. Nothing. During that same period, right-wing extremists committed nearly twice as many incidents, 115. And the majority of those involved deaths, injuries, or damaged property. Right-wing extremists are often much more deadly, and they do target police officers. You don't see the president running white boy commercials, do you? I don't see the president running white boy commercials. I do see him running a commercial about Mexicans and conflating it with the situation in Honduras, which is not the same country, and smearing all people of Latin heritage in the process, just like Jesse Helms did to all black people, just like George Bush I did to all black people. And by the way, Trump throws in a little bit of anti-Semitism also, because when he talks about the caravan and he's asked if this was sponsored and paid for, and I told you the guy who organized this caravan was on Honduran cable television. His name is Bartolo Fuentes. He is the leader of the Libre Party, which is a political party in Honduras that tries to they try to get people to vote against these right-wing authoritarian governments, right? And he went on cable television making his case and was telling the people of Honduras that they were safer if they traveled together, and they wouldn't need to pay $7,000 for a coyote to take them and their children if they would all just go together. That's how this happened, okay, on cable television in Honduras. But when Trump was asked yesterday if George Soros is paying them to do this, for what reason I have no idea, he said, yeah, a lot of people say that.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. No, I wouldn't. I don't know who, but I wouldn't be surprised. A lot of people say yes.
A lot of people say yes. Well, Stacey Abrams, I got to get her name right. I apologize to you. You're awesome. You're an amazing, amazing person. She was asked last night about this ad, this disgusting, heinous smear everybody from everywhere.
I think that it's deeply sad that the leader of our nation would stoop to lies. Everyone knows that this is a bipartisan failure to address our federal immigration system. And I think everyone believes there's no American who wants violent offenders wandering our streets.
Really?
No one wants violent offenders, human traffickers, or drug cartels in our country. But to cast aspersions on one party rather than take responsibility for failing to take action, to actually pass bipartisan federal immigration laws that can protect our people, but also as a woman of faith can protect our families and make certain that families aren't ripped asunder. This is one more issue where Republican leadership has failed our country. And I hope that we will find leaders in this midterm who will stand up and work together across the aisle to find solutions.
Truer words could not be said. And it's not just because she's a Democrat, and it's not because she would be the first African-American woman to be a governor of a state, let alone a southern state like Georgia. It's not because of that. It's because it's true. It's because in 2006, there was bipartisan legislation that passed the Senate 68-32. Bipartisan legislation, 68-32, for comprehensive immigration reform. When it went over to the House, they buried it. John Boehner, who now advocates for marijuana. I don't know if you've seen or heard the ads where John Boehner, now is the time to invest in marijuana. This is a guy who was all about the war on drugs. Okay. Anyway, Boehner buried that bill, refused to even let it be debated. No vote was ever held. That was probably the best piece of legislation that a bipartisan, effort could have produced, and he wouldn't allow it to even see the light of day in the House. All right, again, 2013, bipartisan legislation passes the Senate, 68-32, goes over to the House. Paul Ryan buries it. Not even a debate. It's like Merrick Garland, not even an interview, not even a visit to a Senate office. Just, it came from a Democrat touched it. It's now soiled. Can't look at it. They like the issue. They like the racism. They like playing these cards. They like these commercials. They like dividing America. They love to tear us apart because when we're torn apart like this, they believe that they can plunder. They think they can steal. They think that they can take. And who do they take from? You, the freaking middle class. They don't represent the middle class. Joe Biden was awesome, by the way. Why the news media does not cover the Democrats? I'm not sure what that is.
We have much to do. The first thing we have to do is change the political climate. For our children's sake, for all our sake, for America's sake. We have to restore the basic economic bargain in addition to that. There used to exist in this country. A bargain which Democrats and Republicans signed on to for the previous 70 or 80 years. It went like this. If you contribute to the well-being of the enterprise you belong to, you got to share in the profits. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't happen. Productivity went up from 1945 to 1973, 96%. Wages went up 92%. From 73, productivity went up 77%. Wages went up 12%. The middle class is being killed. And by the way, I still have 45 employees working with me, some really bright economists. And you ask an economist what middle class is, they'll give you a number. 52,500, 54,000, they debate it. It's not a number, it's a value set. Middle class means you're able to buy your own home and not have to rent it.
Yes.
Middle class means you're able to send your kid to a park where you know they're going to come home safely. Middle class means you can send them to a decent high school. If they do well, they can go to school after high school. And you'll figure out how the hell to get the money to get them there. Middle class means being able to take home your geriatric mom after your dad dies and pray to God your children never have to take you home. Folks, that's middle class. It's a little bit of peace of mind, just a little bit of breathing space, but it's shrinking.
It's shrinking. They're killing us. And then they have the nerve. They have the nerve to stand there and say, oh, I'm all about the forgotten man. They have never been the party of the forgotten man. They have never been the party of labor. They have never been the party of wages. They have never been the party of the middle class. They have never been the party of infrastructure. They are the party of banking. They are the party of ripping you off. They are the party of privatization. They are the party of stealing. That is what they do. And the more chaos, the more they can steal. Remember 2008. Just saying. And Trump is out there and getting people to cheer for even further deregulation. He's getting them to cheer against their own best interests. Why? Because he plays the race card. Because he plays the hate card. Because he's able to successfully dehumanize people. Jews, Latinos, Democrats, blacks, you name it. The media. Enemy of the people. Enemy, 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 enemy. Remember the insula and the amygdala. Just remember. So meanwhile, you have all these white supremacists that are causing all of this violence in this country. Far, far greater violence than any Muslim. I mean, it's so funny because they literally took the focus off white supremacy and put it on Islamic terrorists, right? And I tell you, there's 3 cases outside of Fort Hood. There are 3 cases, and they were all foil plots. They had all not been able to carry out their plots because the FBI coordinates and has been involved in with state and local officials. But that's all they look at. They don't look at any of the white supremacists. They don't do a damn thing about. And the white supremacists kill police officers. We've had 1 million violent crimes committed every single year in the United States, and domestic terrorism incidences are still only in the dozens, except for white supremacists. Those are in the hundreds. Those are in the hundreds. And we don't do a damn thing about it. He doesn't talk about white boys. He doesn't talk about middle-aged white men who committed the last rash of crimes, the bombing, the shooting in the Kroger, and the shooting at the synagogue. He doesn't, he never talks about that. Isn't that something? I find all this just so disgusting. I can't even, because this is just further proof that he does not have an interest in solving any of your problems.
Well, I'm sorry I missed that last night. I was out with my 3 kids trick-or-treating. We prefer treats in my house. They had a lot of tricks going on apparently last night with the president, Mr. DeSantis. But again, Mr. DeSantis said the president have no relationship with the truth. I believe in borders. I believe in the law. What the president has turned our immigration and enforcement agency into is a family separation force, putting kids in cages and separating, feeding babies from their mothers. That's not who we are. The real threat is in fentanyl being dropped into this country, coming from Asia. It is rapists and sex traffickers and quite frankly, very dangerous murderers coming in because our folks are focused on ripping babies away from their parents than on actually securing our borders.
Right. We have 15,000 troops not going down there to combat, drug mules. They're going down there to stare down 3,500 women and children who will surrender and ask for asylum. Don't you get? We're all being had here. Well, we're not being had, but I mean, the people that are supporting him, the people that went to that rally last night in Estero, where he told them that the media is the enemy of the people and that these people are not angels and the ones that are coming in are all criminals and all. They're being had. There is a problem with some drugs coming over the border. The biggest problem is fentanyl being shipped from Asia, which is what's killing people. I mean, you had, 79,000 people die of a drug overdose. I don't see him doing jack squat about that. And I just don't see, all this crime that he sees happening in the border cities. El Paso is completely safe. Marfa, safe. Stupid. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.